So glad to have you joining us today. Esau, glad you have been able to make time for this. I'm very excited to talk about my new book, Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters. I gave a copy to a new friend just a few days ago. It was Daniel Nayeri, and
Yeah.
he was like, oh, Esau McCaulley. And then all of a sudden it was a book he wanted to read. So so thank you for writing the foreword because as we know, this will kind of open up more people's openness to reading the book who've appreciated your work. So what we're going to do is just talk about the book for a little while and talk about maybe first how we met and how this collaboration happened. And then we'll get into some more details. So I first met Esau. I have a very distinct memory of our first meeting. We were in a house. There's a house on campus at Wheaton College. I was a PhD student. Esau was a prospective PhD student. And so we were having a little mingler between the prospective students who were there for interviews and those of us who were current students. And Esau walked across the room to me and he said, "You're Carmen Imes." And I
Yeah.
said, yeah, but like, how the heck did you know
Yeah.
that? Like, nobody knows me. And he goes, "Well, I've read your blog."
Yeah.
And I said, "How is that possible? Only my mom and her friends read my blog."
I was in.
This,
I can say that I was an early adopter. Everybody IVP came later.
oh,
All
yeah.
the people on this call came later. But I read the blog back in 2000 or whatever, and I said, "There's a theological star in the making." And so I was a fan
So,
back then. I remember reading your work and talking about what it meant to do a PhD, and it helped me as someone who was at the beginning of the process to know that I wasn't alone. And
mm.
so, yes, I've been a fan of Carmen before it was fancy, before the trilogy even started. I was already there.
So what was this, like 2009?
Let's see. I was in
No.
St. Andrews from 12, sort of in like 12 or
So
13.
12. Yeah,
Yeah.
2012-ish. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
So,
I did my PhD from like 13 to 16, so it would have been sometime
yes.
before then.
Okay. Perfect. So we kind of stayed in touch in the blogosphere. We had a great time just like following each other's journeys. Esau didn't end up at Wheaton at the time because he went to St. Andrews, but he later came back to Wheaton on faculty. So he's currently a professor of New Testament at Wheaton. He has a chaired position. What's the name of your chair?
Jonathan Blanchard, Chair of New Testament and Public Theology.
All right. So, which means that part of his job is to do public facing work and to connect with the wider world. And this is something I have loved about Esau's scholarship from the beginning. He has, written technical monographs, but he's also written children's books and New York Times articles. And his most famous book that he's known for is Reading While Black. And it was the editor of New Testament in Color. So he has books across the whole spectrum of, from a 5-year-old to a PhD student would want to read his monograph. And yet he's not stuck in academia. He's communicating to a wide range of people, which is also what I aspire to do.
Well, I would say that you've already succeeded in doing that. That your work, one of the reasons why I liked your work from the beginning was it was something that was also accessible to people. And this is not going to be a mutual admiration fest because I'm already off script. But I would say even the stuff that you do as it relates to Torah Tuesday, for those of you who don't know, she has a YouTube page, or YouTube channel, Torah Tuesdays, where you actually take the Bible and you give it to the masses. And so you've also always been someone, and even a blog back in the day, that's just like public theology. So I don't think that me and you are terribly different in that we exist in between the church and the world. Am I allowed to start asking you questions now? Because nobody wants to hear about my background. They want to hear about Carmen. Can I talk about you for a second?
All right, let's do it.
Okay. So, Carmen, you have a book that I decided to write a forward for. Why do we need to have this book right now? Tell me, why do we need it? Why should I know why I liked it, but tell the people why they need to have, why does the church need this book at this moment?
Well, to me, it seems like we're at a place where church isn't obvious anymore, where people who maybe grew up going to church have disconnected, maybe taken a step back and said, "Hey, I just need some time off," either because they're disillusioned by the theology or practice of church leaders or other members of their church, or maybe because their lives have just become so intense, they just like need space, and so they're stepping back. And I'm convinced, and I think you're convinced, that the church still matters, that we can't be all that we were meant to be without it. And so, when I thought of, who should we have write the forward to this book,
Yeah.
you were an obvious choice because as an academic, you care about the biblical theology work that I'm doing in the book, but also you are so committed to the church and have stayed committed to the church in spite of a career in academia.
Yeah, I think that it's really easy. One of the things that's tricky, and I know this, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, but you brought me into this. Now I got to hit this
Yeah.
up. One of the things that's tricky is how do you talk about like the church? Because when you talk about fixing the church, it's like there's 2 billion Christians in the world. And if there's 2 billion Christians in the world, I say there's always a Christian somewhere doing something they have no business doing. And
True.
and part of the job of people who write, people who speak, they want the church to be better, to be better, to be better. But that means it can be easy to focus only on the negative experiences that people have of Christianity and not see the potential good in the church. And for me, what it means to remain committed to the church is not to ignore the difficulties that we have, but point towards people, towards the fact that there's still this place for transformation. Now, for you in your
Mhm.
book, this relates to this. It's rare that someone can have a book that meets the right moment. Because when you get an idea for something, whether or not that idea will still be present when the book comes out is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But it seems like you must have noticed something 2 to 3 years ago that was happening in the church that
Mhm.
allows your book to be coming out, Why the Church Matters, precisely when people need to hear this argument.
Mm.
Did you sense something in your spirit? Did you have a particular group of people who you said, I
Mm.
think that even in the time that it takes me to write this, when this book comes out, it will be good for these people?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I saw the trend during COVID as we all disconnected from regular gatherings. And there was a sense in which, inertia keeps you going. Like I'm just in the habit of going. And so COVID broke the habit. And I thought, ooh, when the time comes to go back, I wonder how many people will just opt out
Yeah,
because they've decided, oh, the world hasn't fallen apart because I'm not at church. I mean, the world was falling apart, to be clear, but
yeah,
like my going to church isn't going to fix that. And so I think I was anticipating that there would be some fallout from COVID, but also just that we've been now in 10 years worth of hashtag me too, church too stuff that doesn't seem to be slowing down.
yeah,
The number of headlines about church leaders who failed, the polarization between Democrat and Republican in our country, and what that means for the church, where people increasingly feel homeless in the church. Like I've known people who have stopped going to church because of the politics of the pastor,
yeah.
and they just feel like there's no place for me here. And so I felt like that polarization wasn't going to go away easily. So this would be the time to do it. And I love what you said about um, being honest about what's wrong in the church, because one of the places in the book where I quote you is you had a New York Times article about critiquing the country we live in, like as a form of patriotism.
Yeah.
Like when we love being Americans, that is why we are willing to speak up and say when America is not living up to its ideals. And and this, I think, is the guiding principle for my whole book. I
Yeah.
want to call people back to the church, but that doesn't mean I'm going to only say rosy things about the church. I think we need to name what's wrong so we can call people to something better.
You want to invite people back to something that's healthy. And that's the hard part is to name, and I think you did a great job with this in the book, to name the problems, to not be dishonest about them, but not to despair of the solution. Now I'm going to ask you this question because I do New Testament, you do Old Testament. There's often like a little bit of gentle ribbing going back and forth where you guys go, we got most of the Bible. And they say, we got the New Testament where
You
Jesus
got the
shows.
appendix.
Yeah. You know, Jesus in the Old Testament too. Like I get all of that. I get it. I get it. I get it. So I'm gonna try to be nice to my Old Testament colleague and ask this question. It was kind of a move to do a book about the Old Testament pointing towards the church. What does the Old Testament have to say about how we should live as the people of God? Why did you choose, other than the fact that
Yeah.
you have a PhD in Old Testament, why did you choose to use these Old Testament narratives to kind of frame why the church still matters?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I get a little bit like wiggly when I hear people say, well, the church started at Pentecost.
Yeah.
And I would be like, well, what about all the stuff that came before that, where God's gathering his people around his presence and commissioning them to represent him in the world? Like that seems like that's kind of important too. And
Kind of a
so
big deal. I got it.
kind of a big deal. And so part of what I wanted to do was help people see the Bible's not all about you, singular. It's about us, plural, becoming God's people. And if we're going to see that in the New Testament, it really helps to set it up in the Old Testament. I think a lot of people will be surprised when they pick this up, especially if they don't know me as an Old Testament scholar. They just see your name on top and they see that like church is in the title. I'm guessing they'll be like, oh, this is going to be a book about the New Testament.
Yeah.
And actually, three-quarters of it is Old Testament. And so that will surprise people. But what I'm hoping is that it slowly will help people develop a sensibility for what was God always, what was his intention from the beginning for the gathered community. We see snapshots of where it goes well and snapshots of where it does not go well. And that kind of helps build our sensibility for how to recognize a healthy community today.
And one of the things that you're doing in this book is you are also teaching people how to read the Old Testament too.
Mm.
Because you talked about there, I was thinking about that as you related to snapshots, because
Mhm.
everything that the Old Testament uses, even in the New Testament, teach us isn't through exemplars. Like you should be this way. There are a
Mhm.
lot of places where you talk about how the failures of the characters in the Old Testament also helps us to understand things we should avoid. Now, let me ask you this question, because I'm this is off the script. She's not prepared for this question. I love to I had this planned, Carmen. So I know that we like to be super humble about our books, and we like to treat each chapter like our children. But I think that every writer has a portion of the book where they feel like, I can't wait for people to read this part 'cause I think it's really going to help them.
Ooh.
So is there a part where, as a writer, you were excited in the writing? Was there a part that just jumped out to you
Mm.
and said, "Oh,
Mhm.
I think people don't think about this a lot, or this will be a new
Mhm.
insight"?
Yeah.
What is the part where you had the joy of articulating something that you can't wait for people to
That's a fun question. And to answer it, I'll say that so I filmed some video courses for this book, as I also did for my other two books with IVP, with Seminary Now. And I had the same film crew all three times. And so this July, when I was in Chicago filming for Becoming God's Family, we got through the first like two video clips, and the guys came out from around the camera, and they were like, "So we knew you already. That this book feels different."
read? Yeah,
And I said, "Oh, what feels different about it?" And they said, "It feels very pastoral."
yeah,
And so when you ask your question, what I think of is really the first chapter where we, right off the bat are talking about Abraham and Sarah and the way they abuse and mistreat Hagar and how God meets her in the wilderness. Because I felt like in a book on the church, there's undoubtedly going to be people coming in who are like, oh yeah, well, I've been hurt and I don't think I'm able to trust again.
yeah,
And so I knew that it was going to be really important to address church hurt head on. And it's right there in Genesis.
yeah,
It's right there with Abraham and Sarah, the main couple through
yeah,
whom God is going to bless all nations, are instead of blessing the nations, mistreating and abusing the nations.
yeah,
And what I love about that story is that Yahweh is not over there patting Abraham on the back, for being the big man and getting what he wanted.
yeah,
He's out there in the desert with Hagar,
yeah.
meeting her in her time of need and shepherding her soul, giving her hope for the future, providing food and water. And I think what I hope people will get from the beginning is that if you've been disillusioned by the church, if you've been hurt by the church, you that can be disentangled from your view of God, because
Yeah.
the God who loves you and is calling you into community and into relationship with himself does not tolerate abuse.
Yeah.
So what bothers you also bothers God. And so I'm really hopeful that this book will be healing for people who read it and have been hurt.
Oh, so there we go. I think that that's one of the things. It's interesting that you said that because I was actually thinking as when I opened that chapter and I was like, oh, this is it's interesting that both me and the person who the people who recorded your video had the exact same sense.
Hmm,
That
hmm,
opening to the book did strike me as particularly compelling. So me and
hmm,
you agree. There we go. So last question, I think you can ask me some stuff. You books change us, right? The
hmm.
writing process of the book changes us. How has writing this book,
Hmm.
dealing with the pluses and the minuses, the positives and the struggles and all of those things, how has it impacted how you understand, how you experience church as a regular attender of a congregation?
Yeah, it has changed me, and I think I had a process whereby like okay, I realized we need to make a case for church. But then as I was working on making the case, I felt like I was convincing myself or sort of realizing afresh how important the church is and how beautiful it is and how unexpected it is and how delightful it can be. And as I was working on trying to convey to my readers what's beautiful about the church, what's hopeful about the church, it made me like, it kind of tuned my eyes to see things that were beautiful and hopeful in the church. So I've done a lot of traveling to speak this year. I've been in a lot of different congregations across the theological spectrum, all across North America. And over again, I've been so delighted and inspired by the ways that churches are reaching out into their communities. Like whole ministries have inspired me, but also just sitting in the pew on a Sunday morning, watching the kids come back from their children's church. Like we dismiss the kids partway through the service and then they come back right before communion so they can participate with us. And when all the kids are filtering back in, I just love the moment where they're so excited to show their drawings to their mom and dad and then they like look and see a college student and they're like hi, you know, they get all excited. And those moments mean so much to me because I see intergenerational friendships forming that just would not be happening otherwise. Like these people would not be intersecting, their lives would not be intersecting if it wasn't for the church. And so I feel like the way the book has changed me is it's made me like a magnet for stories about good things that are happening in the church. And it's been such a refreshing antidote to all the hard headlines that keep coming at us.
Okay. I will give up control of the microphone and hand it over to you for a couple of seconds before we open it back up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Esau, you know, you obviously you wrote the foreword for this
Yeah.
book. And I'm curious why you said yes. Like, why
Yeah.
say yes to a writing a forward for a book on the
It
church?
always, sorry, let me say this. It always gets me into trouble because, and this is, I mean, everybody does, but when I say I get a mountain of requests for forwards and endorsements, um, I get a lot of them. And I do have a couple of rules that I actually have to have time to read the book. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on with teaching and I have a pastor congregation. And so a lot of it comes down to do I have time to do it? But I felt like I've read the previous two in the Carmen Imes trilogy. And I liked both of them and I thought they both were useful to the church. And so when this one came along, I said I'd be happy to be able to do so. And so I didn't actually know what to expect. It was just like Carmen Imes writing a book. I'm in. I think that was basically it. Because I do think it's really one of the things that I try to think a lot about is like one of my favorite books is Lord of the Rings. And one of the things is the ring of power, this that he gives to people. They think they're going to use it for good, but the ring of power always corrupts, right? And the only way to have not be corrupted by power is to give it away. And so, because I've had some success, I guess, people care about what I say. But rather than like accruing that to like glory for myself, I try to strategically give that power away. And it's not just like one particular book that a person writes, it's like you get a chance to know them.
Mhm.
And so, I've known you over the course of more than a decade, and I've just enjoyed getting to know you. Like we prayed together. We know about, the things that happens in our family. Like we know each other.
Mhm.
And you're the kind of person who I think deserves an audience. Now, the other part is the book has to be good. So I was like, that was the other part. I was like, okay, I'm agreeing because it's Carmen. And then I was like, oh man, I hope this book is good. And I open it and it's actually good. So I could give like the full throated, other than like, there's two different types of I'm going to teach people the code. Sometimes I have to go, here's a book that exists.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I am so grateful that
And then,
you took the
but
time.
Yeah, I want to say like you can say in an endorsing a book, you can say, "Here's a book that exists. Maybe you're interested in it," or you can say something more, which is what actually I did.
Mhm.
Here's an important intervention into a disillusioned world, speaking to the goodness of the church, and I cannot just announce its existence. I can say that it's a positive good. And so as I began to read through the book, which I told Carmen, I'm agreeing, but let me read it. And if I can read it, I can then and I can not just endorse it, but write the forward. And so as I read it, I really was convinced that this is something the church needs to hear. So your character got me into the door. The quality of the book got me to write the actual forward.
Well, I don't get nearly the number of endorsement requests and forward requests that you do, but I have more than I can say yes to. So I know that feeling of like you even have to say no to people you like and
People,
people whose work you appreciate like repeatedly. And so I'm just really grateful that you made space for this.
yeah. And if I don't endorse your book, if you happen to watch this video, it doesn't mean that I don't care about you and love you. It's got a lot of stuff going on.
We're
Have
just
mercy on me.
limited, man. So
Don't yell at me.
speaking of being limited, it's not like you were twiddling your thumbs. You had a full-time job at Wheaton College, which is a demanding place to work. You've been writing for the New York Times. You're a podcaster with the Holy Post. You're an author. You've got a lot of stuff going on, plus four kids at home that you're trying to manage. So, why did you decide to plant a church now?
Well, it's interesting, in a lot of senses, that the same thing that led you to write the book, Why the Church Still Matters,
Yeah.
is why I decided to plant a church. And one of the things that happens, and you do this a lot too, Carmen, you travel around place after place and you give these talks about Christianity, what it means to follow Jesus. And it can be very immaterial. You go there, you meet somebody, you talk to them for a couple of hours, you have dinner, then you fly back home. And I just didn't have in my brain a theological category for Christian influencer. I'm not saying these things are bad, but I just didn't want to be someone who was adjacent to the church. I felt like in a lot of places that I went, people were asking this question. I want to be able to go to a church where I can love Jesus, invite people who do not know Jesus into a relationship with him, and grow as a disciple of Jesus.
Mhm.
And I have no messianic aspirations. I know I am not the hope of the world. I have a icon in my house that's across from my desk. That's an icon of John the Baptist. Because John the Baptist said, I am not the Messiah. I'm pointing towards the Messiah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I said, I think that what people actually need now, just as much as they need books and articles and these other things, are healthy communities where they can live for Jesus. And I said, I want to do a particular good in a particular place. And so I never had a desire or an aspiration to be like a public figure. I want to help people. Like my days are so boring, Carmen. I walk to class, I walk to campus most days, and then we walk in, we open up the Bible, and we talk about what it means to follow Jesus through looking at these texts. And so for me, the pastoral ministry is an expansion of that. God has decided that I have to go and like do bigger stuff. But my greatest joy is opening up the Bible with people who I know, and
Mhm.
planting a church is an opportunity for me to do that.
Mhm. That's beautiful. What are you learning about yourself in this role? Like, I think when we saw each other in July, I
Yeah.
think you told me this is the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah, I would say, a lot of times when you're an academic, you talk about things in the abstract.
Mm.
And I've been able to put into practice a lot of things that I wrote about.
Mm.
And so it does feel very good to see the same people week in and week out and to go through like the normal stuff. So like right now, we're thinking about what's the next a space we might have to worship in,
Mm.
or because we're growing a little bit, or we're like running out of, I shouldn't say that. Our things like where's the money going to come from, and we have like high school ministry. How do we do high school ministry? So for me, these practical questions of real people doing real good in a particular place is something that makes me so happy. I think
Mhm.
when I was I still write, but one of the things that makes me happy as a writer is when someone says to me, I get an email from a pastor or a clergy person or even a lay person who says, oh, I used your book in a sermon,
Hmm.
or I quoted you in a sermon,
Hmm.
or your book helped me work through these issues in my faith. Just like hopefully, like someone reads your book and they go, I feel comfortable going to church again.
Mm.
And that's success, right?
That would be huge success. Yeah.
And so that kind of feeling is very intangible. When you
Hmm.
write a book, you just kind of give it to the world and you hope that it does good
Hmm.
somewhere. And sometimes you hear back.
Hmm.
For me to be able to be in a community of people who are trying to live for Jesus is just something that just makes me happy.
Hmm.
I never thought that I would be a writer. I always thought that I would be a pastor. And so
Mm.
it's been a joy for me to be able to do that work again.
That's so cool. What would you say to somebody out there who's listening who has been either hurt by the church or they've just tried to find a church and have not been able to find one where they feel like it checks all the boxes or it's the right fit? What would you say to somebody in that boat?
I would say love is always risky.
Mm.
So there's a truth that first of all, I want to acknowledge, like when I say like the harm the church has done to people, it is not an abstraction. It is like I have personally been harmed by Christians who've done cruel things to me personally.
Yep.
And I felt this need to protect myself from the wounds of other Christians. And I understand that. But I want to say that like in order to be loved, you have to be known.
Mm.
And part of being known is the vulnerability that people might not use that knowledge well.
Hmm.
And I wish that I could promise that would never happen to someone, but sometimes it does. But that's not just in the church, it's in any relationship. There's this danger between if I open myself up to someone, will they hurt me?
Hmm.
But if I close myself off, I'm closing myself off from the potential of love. And so what I hope that your book does, and I hope that like people get to this place of saying, the good of community is worth the risk.
Mm.
Now, obviously, you want people to not be reckless with that love, right? You don't just like throw yourself out. You just kind of say, okay, let me do the best job that I can to discern that this is a healthy community.
Hmm.
Is this community rooted in an attempt to hear, listen, and obey the word of God? Does it have the like the fruit of the spirit indicative of like within the community? Does it
Hmm.
have the kinds of structures in place to prevent or at least lessen the likelihood of harm? Does it have places of being able to reform itself when it's insufficient? But you could do
Hmm.
all of that stuff and do all of that information, but at a certain point, you have to be known.
Hmm.
And I would say we have this real struggle in our culture is that we're deeply lonely and we struggle to trust.
Hmm.
And that struggle to trust is well earned, but I don't know another way to um, overcome the isolation. Church is still a good.
Hmm.
Christ died for his church, knowing that it is a hospital
Hmm.
where people are in different stages of healing.
That's right. Beautiful. Appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to out you here a minute and let everybody know that the book is coming out on Tuesday, October 28th, which
Oh
is
yeah,
next Tuesday. That happens to be
my
none
birthday.
other than Esau's birthday. So, if you have already purchased a copy of Becoming God's Family, then great, you're all set. And you can buy a copy of your favorite Esau McCaulley book that you haven't read, like Reading While Black.
No, 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 no,
You
no, no,
know,
no, 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 no.
I
This
want
is not
everyone
a
to read
side
it.
promotion. So they try to tell me when I am and am not allowed to say on these things. I'm in charge of my birthday. I got
Okay.
enough copies of Reading While Black sold. I mean, he's gonna get mad at you for saying that. You can buy those on the 29th, but on the 28th, on the release date of Carmen Imes' book, I want you to put it on the screen again.
Here we
Okay,
go.
I want you to buy that book on my birthday, and and tag me to death in and say happy birthday, Esau. Hope I
Oh,
enjoy.
that's awesome. I love that.
I'm
I love
fine. We'll be fine. Like, buy Reading While Black on the 29th or the 27th.
it.
But on your release day, this is about you. And I want to say, obviously, We did not plan the release date launch around. It was not planned. That was Providence. But it's just I think that people need to know and understand the union between the Old and the New Testament and how it's telling one story of God creating a people. I think that the ways in which you show the positives and the negatives of what the biblical characters do and how they point to the possibility of our healing are as important. And so, no, on my birthday, I will be in my with my family enjoying a birthday dinner, probably barbecue, maybe Indian food.
Ooh.
And hopefully everybody else will be out buying your book.
Thank you, Esau. It has been super fun to work with you on this, and I'm just so grateful for your voice and the project. So, and thanks for joining us today to talk about it.